Don't forget, you guys have a cram course this Saturday. Lane, same little drill as last week. Lane will send you an email tomorrow morning. That email will have Annie's Zoom link so you can access the call Saturday morning. If you don't get Lane's email tomorrow, please reach out to one of us tomorrow afternoon, evening, so we can make sure we get you in. Oh, 1 week from today, we're going to be taking a test. We'll talk more about that before we leave this afternoon. And then please don't forget as well, you got your retake on March 13th. Good morning. So if you don't pass the exam next week, you make at least a 50%, you get a second shot. And that second shot is on March 13th. Questions about our upcoming dates? I have to translate that one. Thank you. Good morning. I learned something today. All right. The other thing I told you guys the other day when we were in fair housing, when we were in Unit 19, and I told you we'd go back and look at one of our listing or one of our agency agreements, and then I forgot to do it. So I made myself a note, and I want to make sure that we check that out today. But if we look, let's just pull the first one we find is our exclusive right to sell listing agreement. And remember, one of the musts of our agency agreements, let me rephrase that. One of the musts of our written agency agreement, anything that's always going to be required, is our non-discrimination clause. And so if we look at our listing agreement, this says the agent of the firm shall conduct all brokerage activities in regard to this agreement without respect to the race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familial status of any party or prospective party. Further, realtors have an ethical duty to conduct such activities without respect to sexual orientation or gender identity of any part of a prospective party. So we're going to see this non-discrimination clause in all of our agency agreements. Our listing agreement, our buyer's agency agreement, our property management agreement. If for some reason you want an attorney to draft you up your own agency agreement to use, commission rule says that this is a must. This is a requirement that we have the non-discrimination clause. Questions or comments about that? Right, like I said, before we leave today, we'll go over a couple things. I know you guys will be in study mode this weekend, so we'll remind you where we can find some practice study quizzes. I do think by this point, it's, going over some quizzes, particularly the comprehensive exam. So I'll remind you where that is before we leave this afternoon. Good morning. Y'all want a Kahoot? Yay, grab your phones. We're going to Kahoot. This Kahoot is on units 17 and 19. So we got a couple questions from our appraisal unit, and then we have a couple questions from fair housing. So if you're scanning the QR code, there you go. You're accessing Somebody has a birthday today. Happy birthday, whoever you are. Crystal, remind me at the end, and we'll. Good morning. Everybody in that wants to play? Somebody's phone just went to sleep. Everybody in that wants to Kahoot? Ready? All right. See what we got. So unit 17 and 19. Question number 1. An appraiser is most commonly asked to Eight seconds. Appraiser is most commonly asked to, good job guys, estimate the market value. Remember, the appraiser doesn't say what it's worth. They just offer their estimate of the opinion. The buyer is the consumer. The buyer is the one that gets to determine what it's actually worth, determine that market price. Questions on this one? The appraiser just offers their estimate or their opinion. Okay. So we got Cruz came out the gate, followed by Will and Nicole, Mads and him. Question number 2. The sales comparison approach to value would be most important when estimating the value of. Eight seconds. Sales comparison approach is most important when we're looking at resale residents. Yep, good job. So sales comparison is best for resale, single family, and land. So sales comparison is best for resale, single family, and land. Your retail and your apartment building, we would use the income capitalization approach, because an apartment building and a retail location collect rent. They produce an income. So income producing properties. And then the church would be best under the cost approach. It would be a special use property. Questions on this one?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
Could you just real quick say it again, what each thing is for?
Of course. So the sales comparison approach is the best approach when the appraiser's trying to put value on resale, single family, and land. Cost approach is best for special use properties. So think churches, schools, libraries, hospitals, new construction. And then the income capitalization approach is the approach we take for properties that produce an income. In other words, they collect rent. So our apartment buildings, retail and office park, maybe. Is that good? Anything else? Other questions on this? So we got Cruz is staying on top. Nicole came up, Lisa came up, him came up, Sarah came up. Joe is our highest climber this round. You're up 4 places. You may see a little summit on your phone. Number 3, in the cost approach to value, the appraiser may make use of the 5 seconds. Cost approach, appraiser is going to make use of the replacement costs, maybe the reproduction cost. So as a quick recap on the cost approach, the appraiser will separate the land from the structure. Excuse me. So they put a value on the land as if it were vacant. They're going to pretend that there is no structure on that hunk of dirt. We're just valuing the land. And then they put a value on the structure. They're going to look at either the replacement cost or the reproduction cost. In other words, if we were going to build this structure today, what would it cost us? And then they need to take into account things like the useful life of the structure, depreciation, how many years into its useful life is it? So they arrive at a value for the land, a value for the structure, and then they bring them together for the cost approach to value. The sales price of similar buildings in the area, that is the sales comparison approach. So the mustard colored one, the sales price of similar buildings, that's looking at comps of recently sold comps nearby. Owner's original cost of building has nothing to do with present value. I think we all have seen prices go up in our lifetimes. So what you paid for something 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, doesn't really matter today, does it? So the owner's original cost. And then tax value, again, is different. How properties are assessed for taxes is different than how they're assessed for the appraiser's purposes for the lender. Questions on this one? Let's see what we got. Cruz is staying on top. Lisa's up. Nicole is on. AH is up. Him is back on. Our birthday girl is our highest climber. I won't tell anybody, I promise, if you tell me in a private chat. But whoever you are, happy birthday. Question number 4. It is illegal for a lender to refuse to make a loan in a particular area based on the 10 seconds. Illegal for a lender to refuse to make a loan based on the neighborhood. We called that redlining in Unit 19. Redlining was the former practice of the lender. Some lenders, not all lenders, but some lenders had the practice of redlining, in which case they would put a map of the city on the wall. And they would actually take their red marker, walk up to the map and say, folks, we're not going to originate a loan here, here, or here. It had nothing to do with the property itself, the specific property. It had nothing to do with the people. It was the neighborhood. It was the area. As we learned the other day, redlining is prohibited practice now, no longer allowed. Questions on this one? We got a good Kahoot going on today. This is fun. Cruz, Lisa, and Nicole are not budging. Him and Joe are on. SCC is our highest climber, up 3 places. Question number 5. Discrimination based on familial status was prohibited with the passage of the 8 seconds. Familiar status became prohibited with the Fair Housing Act of 1988. Good job, guys. What's that chart we saw in Unit 19 on page 477? 477. I do like that chart because it gives us when the protected classes came to be. To be familiar with when they came in and who the protected class or what the protected classes are. So Fair Housing brought us familiar status, or Fair Housing Act, excuse me, of 1988. In 88, we picked up familiar status and handicap disability conditions. Questions on this one? Cruz, Lisa, Nicole, and him are the ones to beat. Rhonda's on the board. AH is on fire. You have an answer streak of 5. You may have a little fire icon on your phone. And the last one, ADA requires that. ADA requires that reasonable accommodations be made to public places. Remember, ADA is about the public accommodations. Fair housing is the dwelling, the unit. So ADA gives us public places. Who can tell me what's wrong with the blue one? Is it all employers have to follow ADA? It's
15 or
not
more.
all. I say it again.
15 or more.
15 or more. Thank you. So ADA only requires employers with 15 or more employees. Guys, please, in this next week or so, as we're getting ready, when you see your absolute words, like for example, the word all, that means a whole lot, doesn't it? That teeny tiny word means an awful lot. So pay attention to those absolute words. All, must, never, always. Questions on this one? This was a good Kahoot. I'm pleased. I'm telling you, you guys in my night class have had a good Kahooting. I'm going to have to up my game, my Kahoot game. My next class is not going to like you guys. I'm going to blame you. I'm going to say, well, my last class did so well. Actually, my last couple, I really need to up my Kahoot game. So what do we have? Our third place winner is Nicole. Second place is Lisa, climbed up a little bit. And then our first place is Cruz. Stayed on top the whole time. Good job. Runners up, I got Rhonda's on the board and him. Questions? We cannot stand Kahoot music. I got to shut that up. Questions? All right. So where we're going next, we are jumping into our license law and commission rule. Now, license law and commission rule is the last big section that we have. And specifically in the license law and commission rule, we're going to focus first on the comments. So if you look in the online learning system, the license law and commission rule section, I've not asked you guys to read all of license law. I've not asked you to read all of commission rule. I did ask you to focus on the comments because the majority of the state specific section of your exam comes from these comments. So we're going to start here. We're going to focus here. There are some license law and commission rule that we do need to go back and pick up that are not covered under the comments. So we will absolutely address those as well. So in addition to this section, again, this section being the biggest part of your state exam, but also keep in mind as you're studying this weekend throughout the class, anything that is a North Carolina specific topic. So anything that's specific to North Carolina could also be a good candidate for a state section of your exam. And as you guys, as you're looking through, if you're looking through PowerPoints, state specific stuff, I put a little North Carolina flag on it. If you just turn to your textbook, just open up a random page of your book. I just picked my book up and opened it to page 356. So why don't you guys randomly open to page 356. Do you guys see on page 356, the left-hand margin that it says in North Carolina? Scattered throughout your book, when you see that in North Carolina in the left-hand margin, that's alerting you to a state-specific topic. Guys, here's the deal with the state section. The national section is very broad. It covers the entire country. State section are things that are specific just to us. It's very detailed. It's very precise. Have you ever sat down and tried to read Law and Rule? Not only is it not a really fun read, but it's law. It's very precise. There's not much wiggle room to it, is there? So we need to be precise. We need to be exact. Testing candidates across the state tend to do much better on the national section than the state section. I think that's for a couple reasons. First off, we're not precise enough. We're not specific enough. We have an idea about some of these law and rule, but we're not precise enough. Honestly, I think the other reason is when you go to PSI Testing Center, you sit down for 2.5 hours and do your national section, and then you start your state section. So I think you're maybe a little tired, seeing a little cross-eyed. So before you take your exams, please remember to get a good night's sleep. Don't stay up all night trying to study. Get you a good breakfast, decent breakfast. Don't go to Golden Corral and hit the buffet, but get you a bagel or something so you're not listening to your tummy grumble. So the rest of this class, the last big section is our state specific section. Again, most of it coming from the comments. I will share this with you guys real quick before we get started. But I had a former pre-licensing student. She was in my class when we were still in person. And some friends and I went out to lunch one day, and she was the hostess at the restaurant that we were working at. And she said, I went to my state exam. I went to PSI, I passed the national, but now I got to retake the state. I didn't pass the state section. I said, okay, so what are you doing? So from her hostess stand, she printed out her copied version of the license law and rule comment, her highlight. So my girl was studying in between seats, which, you know, I thought was really nice of her boss to let her do that. But she said, I know this stuff. I know it forward and backward, but I'm still off by a couple of points. And at that point, I told her, I suggested she go through her book and look for things that say in North Carolina. She reported to me later that looking at the in North Carolina things gave her those couple extra points that she needed. So comments are big, comments are most, but to get yourself another extra point or two that you may need, focus on this in North Carolina, the state specific stuff. So what questions or comments do I have before we get started? Or do you have? All right, here we go. Last big section, license law and commission rule. And that's our objective for this topic, is to just focus on license law, North Carolina license law, and real estate commission rule. I do not have page numbers on my PowerPoints. We're going to go start again. We're going to start going in order of the comments. And then when we're done with the comments, we're going to see some other things that go back and pick up some law and rule. So we have our PowerPoints and you have the comments. And we start with talking about the different license categories. North Carolina is a broker state. We are all brokers. We have different classifications, and we're going to talk about those different classifications next. But North Carolina is a broker state. Other states may be a sales associate state. And in other states, you get your sales associate license, you get some practice under your belt, and then you go get your broker license. In North Carolina, we just bypass the sales associate thing, don't even have it, and go straight on to being a broker. If you think of being a broker as like getting a master's degree in real estate, think of your sales associate as getting a college degree. So other states, you can get the college degree and then get the master's degree. North Carolina, they say, nah, you don't need a college degree. Let's just give you your master's degree. Isn't that interesting? There are a lot of people that will tell you North Carolina is one of the harder states to get your license in. And I'm here to tell you something. Our North Carolina Real Estate Commission is quite proud of that. They are proud of they want to make sure we're capable to work with their public. That's part of the reason why they have the system that they have. So in North Carolina, we're all brokers, no sales associates. And we have different classifications. And the first classification is soon to be you guys, my future provisional brokers. I call my PBs, I call you guys brokers with training wheels. You can ride your bike, but not without training wheels just yet. So how do you become a provisional broker? Well, you pass this class, and then you go on, you pass your state exam. Once you pass your state exam, they will issue you a real estate license. That real estate license will be on inactive status. You can't do anything with it. Good job. How do you activate that brand new license? You affiliate with a firm. As a provisional broker, you cannot be active unless you are affiliated with a firm. You have to have a broker in charge take you under your supervision. Once you're affiliated with a firm, you're active, and you can do just about everything that a full broker can do. If you leave that firm as a provisional broker, your license goes inactive again until you re-affiliate. Everybody good with this? The only way as a provisional broker you can be active is if you're under the supervision of a broker in charge. How you remove that provisional status is by completing your post-licensing. So we have post-licensing. There's 3 30-hour classes. And you guys have 18 months from your date of licensure to complete the 90 hours. Please write that down, not just for your test, but like for your life too. 18 months. So whatever day you get your license, start your 18-month clock. Some of you are ready to go. You're ready to affiliate. You're ready to start buying and selling. You may choose to activate and then take post-licensing while you're active, while you're out there actively practicing. Some of you may choose to remain inactive until you complete your post-licensing and then affiliate. There's no wrong way to do this, just so long as you do it within 18 months. I'll be honest with you guys. I've been, these years that I've been teaching, I've been keeping track. And when I teach a post-licensing class, I almost always have 50-50. Half the class is active and affiliated, half the class is inactive. It amazes me how that almost always works out. So my point to you guys is there is no wrong way to do that. Just so long as you get those 90 hours in. Each post-licensing class does have an exam at the end. Post-licensing test is not near as intense as pre-licensing test. But you still need to commit to post licensing because you still got to pass a test. So pay attention, take notes, do the suggested homework assignments, that kind of thing.
Question.
Please.
Good morning. So you said that we had to affiliate with a broker, a big. So for property management, would that mean affiliate with someone within the property management office? Is that the
Yeah,
same?
absolutely. With the property manager. Yep. So the
Okay.
property managers kind of act as the BIC.
Okay.
So you would have to affiliate. Yep.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Of course. By the way, the 3 post-licensing classes, there's brokerage, relationships, and responsibilities, which is just an awfully fancy way of saying agency. There's a post-licensing class on contracts and closings. And then there's also a post-licensing class on North Carolina law, rule, and legal concepts. So if we were to break that down for a second, what did I just tell you? Units 7 and 8, 9 and 10, and licensed law and commission rule. Those are 3 of our more heavily tested pre-licensing topics as well, right? So we're going to take some of these bigger topics from pre and expand on them, dig a little deeper in post-licensing. You can take your post-licensing classes in whatever order you want. You don't have to take them in any particular order. Again, they don't care how you do it. Just do it. Just get it in. As we said, as a provisional broker, as long as you're under the supervision of a broker in charge, you can pretty much do everything that a full broker can do. The key is you have to be under the direct supervision of a broker in charge. You have to have somebody take you under their wing. Provisional brokers cannot receive compensation from anyone other than their supervising broker in charge, or they may have 2. I'll talk about that on the next slide. As a matter of fact, this rule was amended maybe a year or so ago. No broker, provisional broker or full broker, can be paid by anyone other than their supervising broker in charge. So let's say as a provisional broker, you affiliate with a firm and your broker in charge pairs you up with a seasoned agent. Seasoned agent is just a nice way. It's what we say that they've been in the business forever and ever and ever. So they pair you up with a seasoned agent, let you shadow a seasoned agent. And maybe you do some marketing work, for example, for that agent. Can that agent pay you for doing the marketing work? You can shake your head yes or no. Can that agent that you're hooked up with pay you for doing that marketing work? No, because as a provisional broker, you can only be paid directly by your supervising broker in charge. If that agent wants to pay you, they need to run it through the company. Your principal may try to offer you a bonus. There's no rule that says they can't offer it. The rule says is that we can't receive it, or you can't receive it. A couple years ago, you don't need to know this date, but a couple years ago, they used to say that provisional brokers can only be supervised by 1 broker in charge. A couple years ago, they amended this to allow for 2 BICs as long as both BICs are under the same roof. The reason being for this is the gaining popularity of teams. Teams are set up and structured differently. Right now, commission does not regulate teams, the structure of teams. Some agents will team up to market and advertise together. Other agents will come together and form an actual team. Everybody does something. It's not uncommon for teams to have a broker in charge. So as a provisional broker, if you affiliate with a team that has a BIC, you can be under the direct supervision of both your team's BIC and your office BIC. But the key here is both BICs have to be under the same roof. So you have the team as part of the firm. Questions on soon to be you guys, provisional brokers. We excited? So once you take your post licensing, let me rephrase that. Once you complete your post licensing, you don't get credit for it until you pass the tests. So once you take the 3 post licensing classes, by the way, once you test for post, there's no more tests by the Real Estate Commission. We don't see tests in CE. So there's more good news. Okay. So once you complete your post licensing, you drop your provisional status and you're just a broker. May also be referred to as a full broker. The full broker is one that is met post licensing requirements. They pass the 3 exams. As a full broker, you are active. Maybe you're affiliated with a firm, maybe you're not. As a full broker, you now have the choice if you want to be affiliated. If you choose not to be affiliated, we will talk more about what that means and what that looks like. Bear with me. We're also going to talk later in this section about maintaining an active license. All license categories, once we get that license active, we want to keep it active. So we will talk later in this section about how we do that. So full brokers, if you are affiliated, if you're a full broker and you are affiliated, new rule says you can only be paid by your supervising broker in charge. So now we're full brokers, and at some point in your career, you may decide you want to become the BIC. Couple different things with the BIC. First off, every office has to have what's known as a designated broker in charge. So every office location has to have a designated broker in charge. One person has been designated to act as the boss. That one person has been designated to oversee the day-to-day operations of the office, make sure all the agents are in compliance with like agency agreements and disclosure, supervision of provisional brokers. That per office thing is important. We have lots of firms out there that have multiple office locations. So if you affiliate with a firm with 4 office locations, how many BICs does that firm have to have? That firm has to have 4, right? We have to have a BIC under each roof. In order to become the designated broker in charge, you first must become BIC eligible. And how you become BIC eligible is you have an active license, obviously not on provisional broker status. You have to have some experience under your belt. Can't talk and type at the same time. You have to have some experience under your belt. So you need 2 years of experience within the full-time within the last 5 years. You need 4 years part-time within the last 5 years. I don't know how they determine part-time from full-time. I really don't. But the point here is that you need some experience. You need a couple transactions under your belt, some field work, if you will. And then there's a 12-hour BIC course. These 3 things make you BIC eligible. Once you're BIC eligible, you're positioned, you're eligible to become the designated broker in charge. Some agents choose to become BIC eligible and have no intention of being the designated broker in charge. They may do it themselves just for their own business, their own satisfaction. You could ride forever on a BIC eligible license and never become designated. Anybody gonna open your own firm one day? Is that the plan? couple of you, maybe. You got at least 2 years out, right? So you got a ways to go. 2 years full time. You got to have some experience. You're BIC eligible, which means you're eligible to become the designated broker in charge. Anybody want to be the designated BIC one day? Be the boss? Maybe a few of you. We're going to talk more about the BIC, specifically your choices with licensee options, like if you want to go out on your own, if you want to start your own firm, what you have to do, what it means for you to be a BIC, da 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 da. So we'll talk more about this in just a bit. License categories, though, right now we're just defining the provisional broker, full broker, and broker in charge. Do I have any questions so far? By the way, the commission does have, I don't think you'll be tested on this, but just FYI, the commission does have a position if you meet the criteria and you're a full broker, you can slide into the designated BIC role and then take your 12-hour BIC course. But it's kind of a case of emergency, because guys, if the office loses their designated BIC, the firm loses their office license, provisional brokers go inactive. If the designated BIC doesn't show up for work today, it's a mess. So it's not a bad idea to have some brokers, some BIC eligibles laying around that you could slide somebody in. It is tough, isn't it, Jessica? If you really want it, though, it seems like, I love that you guys are pairing up. I think that's great. So provisional broker, full broker, broker in charge. There is another license category kind of separate from these, and this is called a limited non-resident commercial broker. So let's break this down. Limited means a few amount of transactions. Non-resident means you live in another state. You do not live in North Carolina. Commercial means commercial. This is not residential. So what this license is the opportunity for a licensed agent from another state to come into North Carolina and do a limited number of commercial transactions. They have to get this license. They have to have a broker in North Carolina sponsor them. So they just can't come in the state and start doing what they do. They have to have somebody sponsor them. Doesn't even have to be a BIC, could be a full broker. But that sponsor's just making sure they're doing things the North Carolina way. Again, this is not for residential transactions. This is a limited number of commercial transactions only. The other license category that we have is for your firm. All of your firms have a license as well. They have to renew their licenses every year, just like the rest of us. Again, we will talk about how you renew your license. And the firm has to renew as well. Questions on our license categories? Is that separate? That's right. There's a separate license for limited non-resident. They don't get a North Carolina broker license. They get a separate license. Switching gears just a bit. Here's our funnel. We've seen this a couple times. talking about the activities required for a license. If you're engaging in these activities, a license is required. So the 3 activities, and please remember, all 3 activities are required. So if you see a test question, ask yourself, are we involved in the transfer of real property for others for some form of compensation? We've decided that the for sale by owner or the for rent by owner does not need a license because they're not doing it for others. They're doing it for themselves. So license is not required. If you think you want to work for free without any form of compensation whatsoever, you don't have to have a real estate license. Don't do that, y'all. Please call me before you decide to do that. You deserve to be compensated some way for the work you're getting ready to do. Please, guys, keep in mind when we talk about compensation, we're referring to anything of value. So it's not just accepting commission. It could be performing a transfer of real property for others in exchange for free rent, for example. Is free rent something of value? You better believe it. What about free dinner for the next 5 weeks or something like that? Is that something of value? Absolutely. So it may not come in the form of commission. Let's say, for example, your parents own a duplex and your parents look at you and they say, we'll let you live in one of the units rent-free if you manage the other unit. We'll let you live here rent-free. All you have to do is manage the other unit. Do you need a license in that arrangement? Absolutely, because even though they're your parents, they're still not you. They're still others. So we're looking for the name on the deed. And if your name's not on that deed, you're doing it for others. It's not uncommon in your firms to have unlicensed employees. We're going to look at the list of permitted activities in just a second. You guys may decide at some point in your career that you need help. You need to hire somebody for 10 hours a week. Wouldn't that be a great problem to have? You're so busy, you need somebody to come in and help you 10, 12 hours a week. You could bring on an unlicensed employee. As the supervising broker is the one that is responsible for the actions of the unlicensed employee. The commission can't regulate the unlicensed employee. The commission only regulates licensees. So if you bring on an unlicensed employee, the commission is looking at the employing broker to make sure that the unlicensed employee is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and more importantly, not doing what they're not supposed to be doing. One of the big things about unlicensed employees is how we pay them. An unlicensed employee can only be paid a salary or hourly basis. They cannot be paid commission per transaction. So if you hire somebody to work for you for 10 hours a week, you pay them for 10 hours a week, regardless if you had a closing that week or not. Everybody good with that so far? Only licensees can get commissions, referral fees. So everybody good? I'm going to go off PowerPoint just for a second. We're good? Okay. So the comments gives us a list of things that the unlicensed employee can do. So let's look at this list. And I'm down here. We're on page 3. The unlicensed or salary employee may, you can receive and forward phone calls. I'm over on the left-hand side. Receive and forward phone calls. You can put listings in the MLS. The unlicensed employee can put listings in the MLS as long as the information that they're inputting was provided to them by their employing broker. So their employing broker hands them a piece of paper with information on this and say, put this in MLS. It's data entry only. The unlicensed employee can get copies from the public records. They can put signs and lock boxes on the property. They can order and supervise repairs, maintenance. They can play courier. They can go pick up and deliver documents. The unlicensed employee can provide basic factual information on the property. So if a consumer calls in and asks questions about a property for sale or for lease, the unlicensed employee can answer basic questions. A good rule of thumb on this one is if you can find it online, like on Zillow or Realtor.com, then that's the information that the unlicensed employee can share. If it's not available to the public, then they need to refer the consumer to their employing broker. The unlicensed employee can schedule showings, both for sale and for rent. They can communicate with other licensees, property owners, inspectors. The unlicensed employees can show properties for rent. They cannot show properties for sale. Let's make sure we're really good with that. They can show properties for rent. The unlicensed employee cannot show properties for sale. Anybody ever been to one of these really large apartment complex and you go in to look for an apartment and the person at the front desk may put you in the golf cart and take you around and show you the community? There's a really good chance that person driving the golf cart is an unlicensed employee. But because it's an apartment, because it's for rent, they can do that. If you're going into sales and you're bringing on an unlicensed employee, they cannot show properties for sale. The unlicensed employee can type up offers, contracts, fill in the blanks of the pre-printed forms, as long as the information was provided to them by their employing broker. Again, you guys, it's a data entry only. I hand you a Subway napkin with all this information on this, and I say, fill in the blanks of my offer to purchase and contract. The unlicensed employee can maintain and manage the trust account. We're going to talk about the trust account later in this section. But the unlicensed employee can manage and maintain the trust account. The broker in charge is the one that's ultimately responsible for it. They can assist licensees in getting documents together for closing. And they can calculate and disperse commission checks on behalf of the firm. So we have a very specific list of what the unlicensed employee can do. If you want your unlicensed employee to do an activity that is not on this list, I think it's safe to say that that's an activity they're not allowed to do. Again, what they do is tell us what they can do. Questions on the unlicensed employee? Again, this is on page 3 of your comments. I would look this list over before next Thursday. Is that subtle? I try. Questions so far? All right, my coffee cup tells me it's break time. So let's take 10, come back, keep going, and license law and commission rule. We back? So I'm going to take attendance. And I meant to pull it up. I'm breaking, I forgot, but that's okay because I got it right here. There's a website I was going to show you guys. It's calculator.net. So back to your whole, you have 18 months from the day you get your license to do post licensing. If you go to, for example, calculator.net, I'm sure there are others. And one of the things that you can calculate is a date calculator. You guys see this? So you can put in this date calculator. And if you say, let's say you get your license, when do you want to get your license? Let's get your license on St. Patty's Day. And you have 18 months. So you can say the day you got your license, 18 months, beep, boop, boop, it'll tell you your 180 days is September 17th, 2024. So I just point this out to you guys. Guys, this date gets away from some licensees, this 18 months. And unfortunately, what happens if you don't do post, don't finish your post within 18 months of licensure, then your license is inactive until you get it done. So if you're affiliated and in the throes of a transaction and you don't get post licensing, your license goes inactive, you're out. So please, 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 please don't let this 18 months get away from you. Just a tool to help you know. Thank you guys for telling me you're back. When you do get your license, they'll issue a nice 8.5 by 11 license, and it'll have a date on there. So you know that's your start date. Yeah, make sure you tell me you're back. Thank you. Questions on that? Again, you can probably just go to Google and type, I need a calculator, or how far away is 18 months? And it'll help you out. But calculator.net is one that I've recently come across. The other thing I need to say about that, keeping up with that 18 months is on you. The real estate commission is not going to call you and say, you've been licensed for 6 months. Don't forget to do your post licensing. That 18 months is on you to keep up with. So don't let it get away from you. Okay, so unlicensed employees. We looked at what they can do. Again, one of the big things is they can only be paid salary or hourly. They cannot be paid on a transaction basis. And remember, their employing broker is the one that is responsible for their actions. If it goes down, the commission cannot discipline the unlicensed employee, but they can and will discipline the employing broker. Not everybody needs a real estate license. We've talked about and looked at a few exceptions. Here are all of them right here. We've already decided if you're doing it for yourself, you don't need a license. As long as your name is on the deed, you can do it for sale by owner or for rent by owner. May that be a personal or you own it as a business entity. Attorney, in fact, is somebody that has full power of attorney to act on behalf of another. So, for example, if your parents give you a full power of attorney, you would not need a license to act, a real estate license to assist them in any real property. The attorney at law is one that's an active member of the North Carolina Bar Association. This applies to our closing attorneys. Our closing attorneys do not need a real estate license to do the job of a closing attorney. They just need to be an active member of the North Carolina Bar Association. Now, if that closing attorney wants to help his buddy buy a house, now he needs a real estate license. So just like us, everybody's got to stay in their lane, know their realm. Anybody acting under a court order, so think a guardian of a minor or an executor of a will, would not need a real estate license. Again, they're doing it on behalf of somebody else. A trustee is also an attorney in most cases. They wouldn't need a license if they're handling the interest on behalf of the lender. Maybe you've employed a trustee to help estate planning. They would not need a license. Again, they're staying in the confines of their job. And then anybody employed by the housing authority dealing with property that is owned by the housing authority. If you're an employee of a business or an entity, a housing authority that owns property, you do not need a license as long as you're managing those business owned. Everybody else needs a license. That's why we're here, isn't it? The next section we're going to talk about, we have danced all around them, but we are going to officially introduce you guys to our North Carolina Real Estate Commission. I think that's the first thing I ever told you guys, isn't it? Remember the first slide on day one? I told you the North Carolina's Real Estate Commission's main purpose is to do what? Why do they exist? They're here to protect the public. The whole reason you have to go through this class, get your license, satisfy post-licensing, it's all an attempt to educate licensees for the commission to ensure that their public is protected. They do help us as well, not just the public, but that is their main purpose. So let's meet our commissioners. Our commissioners consist of 9 members. They serve 3-year terms. They're appointed by the governor, secretary of state, some elected official. And of the 9 commissioners, at least 3 have to have an active license. Of the 9, at least 3 have to have an active license. And of the 9, at least 2 do not have a license. As a matter of fact, they're not involved in real estate at all. Isn't that interesting? We have at least 2 commissioners that are a true representative of the public that they are protecting. The purpose and the power of the Real Estate Commission, they are a licensing governing body. The North Carolina Real Estate Commission giveth you your license, and guess what? The North Carolina Real Estate Commission can taketh it away. They regulate our license. They create pre-licensing, post-licensing, our continuing education. Education, not just for us licensees, but they also regulate education for the general public. We've briefly introduced you guys to their website, ncrec.gov. As you get more and more involved, you'll probably be utilizing that website more. It's a great resource, a great tool, and it's all available to the public. So helping to educate not only us, but the public in real estate transactions. And then they do have the power to discipline licensees. We're going to talk about your disciplinary action in just a second. The commission does have the power to make reasonable bylaws, rules, and regulations. We've been talking about license law and commission rule. The commission rule is from the Real Estate Commission. It's rules that they've created and have had passed. Keep in mind, they don't have the power just to create any old rule. It's got to get passed by the House or the Senate. The bill has to get passed. And one thing that the Real Estate Commission is never going to do is get involved with your commission, your salary, the fees that your firm charges. Commission doesn't get involved in your commission. If you're not happy with the commission split you're receiving from your firm, do not call the Real Estate Commission. There's nothing they can do for you. If you're not happy with your commission split, find a new firm. If you get yourself in trouble, disciplinary action. The real estate commission can't fine you. All they can do is regulate your license. There's one exception to that rule, actually. Does anybody remember the category of people that the real estate commission can fine? The only people that they can fine. Anybody remember? Yep. Seeing it pop into chat. Yep. Look at you guys go. The only person that the real estate commission can fine is the timeshare developer. And they have the authority to fine the timeshare developer up to $500 per transaction, per violation, per violation. Other than that, they're going to regulate our license. The commission has the power to discipline our license. Disciplinary action can come from a complaint. If you guys go to NCREC's website and you scroll down near the bottom, right there where you click on apply for your license in that same area, there's a big blue button that says click here to file a complaint. They make it really easy. They may also take actions on their own. So for example, if a consumer hires an attorney, the attorney may report the action of the real estate commission and they may choose to investigate it. If they are going to investigate either from their own or from a complaint, they will send you what's known as a letter of inquiry. The letter of inquiry is your opportunity to respond to the complaint. So if you get the letter of inquiry, they're asking for your side of the story. If you are asked, if you receive a letter of inquiry, the only way you can respond is with your documentation. Remind me again what we document. Everything. So if you have to respond to your letter of inquiry, you're not going to be able to pick up the phone and call the commission and say, let me tell you my side of the story. You respond with your documentation. They may request to see working with real estate agent disclosure, agency agreements, applicable transaction paperwork. They may also want to say email and text correspondence as proof. That's your ticket out, you guys. Once they review your response, they may choose to take further action. What they're looking for is if there's been a violation of license law and commission rule. So they may ask for further information. They may require a hearing. They may ask you to go down to one of their monthly meetings and stand in front of the 9 commissioners. At any time that you receive a letter of inquiry, at any time in the disciplinary process, any licensees is always welcome to bring their own representation. You are always welcome to bring your own attorney, should you so choose. One of the two, I've asked you to read one law and one rule. The law I asked you to read, it's in our Campbell folder, and it's license law 93A.6. You want to know what you could get yourself in trouble for with the real estate commission? Here it is. It's in the Campbell folder of the online learning system. If they do find that there's a violation of license law or commission rule, they could censor or reprimand your license. Just think of these as maybe a slap on the wrist. Don't do this again. You're going to stay on their radar, but you've been given a warning. Maybe they want you to do some extra education, depending on what you did. They could suspend your license, which is temporarily withdrawing it. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 2 years. Always keep in mind, disciplinary actions are handled on a case-by-case basis. Worst case scenario, they can revoke your license, which means they take it back. You will not get a real estate license in this state ever again. And when the investigation starts, the licensee also has the option to surrender their license. So you do have that option if you don't want to go through the hearing. You don't want to go through the process. We always have the option of surrendering our license. Once you guys get your license, I need you to understand you're going to be held to a higher standard, particularly when you're dealing with the public in transactions of property that you own or you plan to own. Once you get your license, you're held to a higher standard because the other side of that transaction is the public, and you as the licensee come in with an advantage. You can't take advantage of that. So you're held to a higher standard. Now they know that you know. They may put an injunction. An injunction is a legal stop. So they may ask the courts to require you to stop your brokerage activities. They can also put an injunction on an unlicensed person if they're behaving in a way that should have a license. The last position I had as an admin administrator, I was the CEO, or I was the executive assistant of the CEO and the COO of a company. And one day my CEO was in her office and she called me. She said, "Julie, can you come in here for a minute? I want to show you something." And I went in and she said, "Come here." And I went and stood behind her and I looked at her computer screen. And on her computer screen, it said, if she was looking at Facebook. So we know she was working hard that day, right? And there was somebody with a post on Facebook advertising their brokerage services under our company's name. And she said, "Who is that?" And at the time I was processing new agent paperwork. So I knew new agents like first. I said, "I have no idea. No idea who this person is. He's not affiliated with us." So we investigated a little deeper, dug a little deeper. Come to find out, this person started pre-licensing, never finished, obviously didn't make it to this slide, right? Started pre-licensing, never finished, but took it upon himself to advertise his brokerage services under our name. I have never seen anybody pick up the phone faster than what I saw her move. And she got that shut down fast. I have no idea whatever happened to him, but she got it shut down. That's it. Not an allowable activity of an unlicensed person. So sometimes playing around on social media during the workday is good because you can catch this stuff. Question comes in, license law and commission rule. LL is license law. CR is commission rule. License law and commission rule. Any violation can also be prosecuted in a court of law. The consumer can always hire an attorney. If the court gets involved, they're the ones that can fine you. The commission disciplines your license. The court can fine you for any damages caused to the injured party. Questions on the commission? Moving on, injunction is a legal stop. Injunction is a legal stop. Moving on in our comments. Comments talks about material facts. We talked about material facts in Unit 7. What's it mean to you guys if we're talking about material facts twice? Kind of sort of important. Yep. So we talked about things that are considered material facts. Material facts are facts about the property itself. Does the roof leak? Does the basement flood? Is there a crack in the foundation? Are there problems with the electrical, plumbing? Is there termite damage? Any fact, material fact about the property itself. A material fact can be a fact relating directly to the property. A proposed zoning amendment, redrawing the school board lines, NCDOT widening the road in front of the property. That's a fact relating directly to the property. A material fact can also be one relating to the ability of our principal to complete the transaction. If we find out for whatever reason that our principal cannot complete the transaction, we have got to disclose this. And I think this is the one that's the hardest for us to get, because we spend a lot of time about keeping your client's information confidential. Yes. And let's say you're under contract and you find out that your buyer can't get loan approval. That's a material fact that I have to disclose to the seller, because if they can't get loan approval, they can't complete the transaction. Is that not important for the seller to know? Even though the buyer might be embarrassed that they can't get loan approval, and they may look at you and say, God, please don't tell anybody. We've got to disclose that because the seller has the right to know. Flip that coin. What if we're under contract and the seller finds out they're losing the property to bankruptcy or foreclosure? We've got to disclose that. If they are unable to complete the transaction, that is a material fact, regardless of the fact that they're our principal. The fourth material fact that we have is a fact for us. Not that I'm going to share with the public, but the fourth material fact are facts that are known to be specific importance to my client or customer. I operate by a simple philosophy. If it's important to my buyer, then it's important to me. If it's important to my seller, then it's important to me. It's not a material fact I'm going to disclose to the world, but if my buyer tells me I have to buy a house that has this criteria, I now have a material fact on my hand. To any fact known to be of specific importance to a party of the transaction is a material fact for us. And then we also talked about things that are not considered material facts in North Carolina. Stigmatized properties are not a material fact. We do not have to volunteer the information. Somebody died in the home, serious injury, criminal conviction. We don't have to disclose that. However, if we're asked, we can't lie. Nowhere in license law and commission rule does it give us permission to lie. The other thing that is not considered a material fact in North Carolina is the presence of convicted sex offenders nearby. Again, I don't have to disclose it. I don't have to volunteer the information that there's a convicted sex offender across the street. Again, if I'm asked, I can't lie. When it comes to the convicted sex offenders, I'm a huge fan of being the source of the source. Tell your buyers and tenants to go to the North Carolina Sex Offender Registry website. I know that's a tough one, isn't it? Let them do their own research and investigation. The information's out there. You can volunteer it if you choose, but state law says we're not required to volunteer. I'll share with you guys, I took CE a couple years ago. We were still in person, and material facts came up. I'm telling you guys, a lot of these topics in pre-licensing pop up again in pre-licensing, or I mean in CE, I'm sorry. So material facts was a hot topic in that year's CE, and a gentleman in the class shared with us that he had recently had a listing, and he was working with the sellers, getting the listing ready to go. And the sellers told him there's a convicted sex offender at the end of the street. They said, what do we do with that information? So he explained his duties as a licensee. It's not something we have to volunteer. We can if we want to. After the discussion, the sellers chose to disclose that information. The sellers chose to disclose that because they, with young children, thought that if they were buying that home, they would want to know. That was a choice they made. Did they have to disclose that? Did they have to volunteer the information? No, but they chose to. Isn't that an honorable decision? Does that make you feel better, Toya? So you can, you can disclose it if you choose, but you got to have that conversation, particularly with your sellers, letting them know we're not required to. As buyers agents, send them to the website, let them do their own investigation. So we have things that are and are not a material fact. Again, also in Unit 7, so you got 2 places for these. And when it comes to material facts, we talked about the prohibited acts, the things that we're not allowed to do regarding material facts. And the 2 big things that we're not allowed to do is lie about a material fact or omit a material fact. I can never lie. And when it comes to material fact, there are no secrets. I can't omit it. A misrepresentation is a lie. An omission means you kept your mouth shut. Whether or not you do it willfully or negligently, it still happened. Willful is intentional. You did it on purpose. You act with knowledge. Negligent is unintentional. You didn't mean to, but you know what? It still happened. If you see these as a test question, what you're going to have is a scenario. The licensee did this, da, 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 da. Your answer choices, you're looking at your 4 answer choices right here. A will be willful misrepresentation, B will be negligent, C will be willful omission, D will be negligent. Don't say I never gave y'all answer choices. There they are, right there. What I want you guys to do first when you see the scenario is to ask yourself first, did the licensee lie or did they keep their mouth shut? Determine that first. Once you determine that, then go back through the problem and determine if they did it willfully or negligently. When it comes to these, I really, really like the examples. I think the examples help the scenarios, the examples. I think it better helps us understand the prohibited acts and material facts. You have examples in Unit 7. You also have examples of all 4 of these in the comments. Questions on our material facts. Don't lie, don't omit. We don't have secrets in this industry. Then the comments goes on to give us a whole laundry list of things that we can't do. Put aside material facts. So the comments goes on, we briefly went over these in Unit 7, but we're going to spend a little bit more time with them now that we're here. So the comments gives us a whole laundry list of things that we're not allowed to do. It doesn't take the fun out of it for us. I cannot make false promises. I can't make any promise to the public with the intent of them acting on the promise. Anything that's going to influence their decision to buy or rent or sell. This does include your advertising. Make sure your advertising doesn't imply any kind of promise. This also includes communicating with other agents. If you make a promise to the member of the public, keep it. Pretty simple, hey? You tell somebody you're going to do something, do it. Another thing that we have a duty to avoid is a conflict of interest. We always have to avoid conflicts of interest. Examples of conflicts of interest to avoid: we cannot engage in undisclosed dual agency. Undisclosed dual agency is just acting like a dual agent without both parties' permissions. Remember, dual agency is intentionally created with informed written consent of both parties. Acting as a dual agent without both parties' permission is a conflict of interest. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I have a weird echo on my end. Is it echoing on your end? Okay, good. Another conflict of interest we need to avoid is self-dealing. Remember what LL&CR says? LL&CR says in part that I put my principal's best interest ahead of all others, sometimes even my own. And if I put my best interest ahead of my principal's, I'm self-dealing. Because if I'm self-dealing, whose best interest do I have? Mine. There's a really good example in the comments. I like it a whole lot. Let's say you are getting ready for a listing appointment. You're doing your research. You're learning about the property. And in your research and learning about the property, you learn that there's a proposed zoning amendment on the table. And if that zoning amendment passes, it's going to greatly increase the value of the homes in that area. So you learn this information. Do you think you should disclose that to your seller? Would that be a material fact related to the property? Yeah. So you learn this, you go to the listing appointment, you're having a conversation with the seller and the seller doesn't mention it. And you think, oh, they don't know about this. So then you offer to buy the property. You tell the seller, I really like this property, just let me buy it. And the seller says, oh my goodness, that's awesome. That means I don't have to list it. I don't have to go through showings. That's great. Thank you. Where do I sign? You buy the property, it closes, the zoning amendment passes, values increase, and you sell it for a profit. Were you self-dealing? Big time. Now, what if? What if you go to the listing appointment and you mention it to the seller? Did you know there's a zoning amendment on the table? And if it passes, it's going to increase the values in the neighborhood. And the seller says, wow, I appreciate you sharing that with me. However, I have to sell. I cannot wait. Now, can you offer to buy the property from the seller? You better believe it because you've disclosed the material fact. Everybody see the difference? We always disclose material facts. The other conflict of interest is representing another broker without consent. As a full broker, you can be dual affiliated. As a full broker, you could hang your license in two different firms, as long as you have permission of both firms. They got to know you're dual affiliated and you have to have permission. The example I think of with this one, I don't know what your retirement plan is, but mine involves a condo at the beach, my toes in the sand. Anybody want to join me? So I may have a place at the beach. I may have my place here, and I may choose to have a license in Winston-Salem and a license at Holden Beach. Can I do that? As long as I have permission of both brokers. Holden Beach needs permission of Winston. Winston needs permission of Holden Beach. I've been asked to go back real quick. All slides are in the online learning system, and we're recording. Y'all make my hand hurt, I swear. Okay. So conflict of interest, something I have to avoid. Something else we're not allowed to do, improper brokerage commission. Again, you can only pay your unlicensed person hourly or salary. You cannot pay that unlicensed person a commission, a per transaction basis, or a referral fee. Only active licensees can get a referral fee. We said earlier that only the provisional broker can get paid from their supervising BIC. Again, that rule has updated just within the last couple of years. All affiliated brokers, provisional broker or full, can only be paid from their supervising BIC. So if anybody wants to pay you a bonus, maybe the builder is offering a buyer agent bonus, that's fine, they can pay you that, but it's got to run through the firm. They can't hand you a check directly. Well, I mean, they can, but you can't accept it. How about that? Is your firm going to give you the full bonus? It's up to your firm's policy. Maybe they'll give you the full bonus. Maybe they'll run it per your commission split. It's all up to the firm's policy. We are prohibited from acting unworthy or incompetent. They do not let us have any fun, do they? We need to act worthy at all times. We need to act competent when we're helping the public buy property. Examples of these would be knowing that we're properly filling in the blanks of our pre-printed forms. Remember, those pre-printed forms that we're filling in the blanks are asking for something very specific. Don't just make something up. That's acting unworthy and incompetent. We always have a duty to diligently perform our services that are listed under license, law, and commission rule. That reasonable skill, care, and diligence in LL&CR. If we fail to provide the settlement statement to our consumer at the end of the transaction, the closing disclosure, that could be seen as acting unworthy and incompetent. We have a duty to avoid improper, fraudulent, or dishonest dealing. I hope this makes sense to you guys. I hope you're not going, oh man, I can't be dishonest. Commission rule covers that. These are going to be handled by case. Again, typically falling under that reasonable skill, care, and diligence. Commission law says we got to avoid discriminatory practices. Any violation of fair housing, federal fair housing or state fair housing, will also be a violation of license law. So the protected classes that we talked about in Unit 19, we need to make sure that we're in compliance with fair housing. We as licensees cannot practice law. We cannot perform legal services. Are we kind of tired of hearing this? There's a reason why we tell you over and over and over again. We cannot draft legally binding documents, even at the instruction of our clients. Please always remember what LL&CR says. I follow my clients' lawful instruction. Guys, buyers and sellers are going to ask. They will ask, can't you just add this provision? Can't you just cross this out? Can't you just pick up your red pen and do this? The answer is no. They want to alter. The parties to the contract can do it, but our advice to them is always get an attorney involved. When it comes to properly filling in our forms, the only thing we're allowed to do is fill in the blank. And again, this is so important because people will ask. Buyers and sellers do not know the parameters of our job. It's not their job to know that. Their job is to buy a house or sell a house, right? It's my job to know the parameters of my job, what I can and can't do. They will ask. We need to know how to respond. I can't tell, for example, my buyers how to take title. So let's say, for example, you're working with an unmarried couple. You know they can't do Tennessee by the entirety because they're not married. So their options are joint tenant, Tennessee in common. Can I tell them which one to do? Can I advise them to go joint tenant, Tennessee in common? No. It's not like we're going to whip out our pre-licensing book and begin to explain joint Tennessee and Tennessee in common with them. We need to make sure to get them to the attorney so the attorney can advise them on how to take title. We cannot violate any commission rule. So any commission rule is kind of a catch-all. If it doesn't fall under license law, it falls under commission rule. So any violation of commission rule could result in disciplinary action. And then the last category of things that we can't do, they just throw under other. Specifically, we can't obtain your license fraudulently. Y'all don't lie on your application to get your real estate license, okay? Please. If they found out you lied on your application, you will lose your license. How do they find out? Doesn't really matter. If they find out you lied, you will lose your license. There was a gentleman in Greensboro, probably about 8-10 years ago, lost his license. They found out he lied on his application. How did they find out, you ask? Because his ex-girlfriend reported him. Y'all be careful with those exes. What did he do to her? That's what I want to know. Once you're licensed, if you're convicted of a misdemeanor or felony, we have a duty to report that to the commission. We will talk more about that. So hang on to that second bullet point. We'll revisit and talk more about that. But once you're licensed, if you get yourself in trouble with the court of law, you have to report that to the commission. Again, more on that coming soon. This covers wrongdoings of your unlicensed employee. They can discipline your license. You're responsible for them. And then if you face disciplinary action from another professional license, this is not your driver's license. This is if you have a CPA or CNA. Does anybody else have another professional license, occupational license? Few of you? Cosmetology. If you get yourself in trouble with your other licensing board, you've got to report it to the real estate commission. Again, more on the second and the fourth bullet point in just a bit, but it falls under this other category. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Questions on the things we're not allowed to do. No fun, right? Can't lie, I can't cheat, I can't be dishonest. Questions on that? One thing I like about the comments, one reason I've been directing you guys to the comments and trying to get you to sit down and read this stuff, a lot of the comments serve also as a good review. So we've already had a good review on material facts. It's a topic that we see twice, Unit 7 and here. I think it's safe to say you're going to see test questions on material facts. But then we also have a good review on our agency agreements, various terms of agency. So our comments go into agency, how it's addressed specific in North Carolina. And one thing we know specifically about all of our written agency agreements is they must be signed by all parties. Parties being the client, the buyer or seller, tenant or landlord, and then the other party being the firm. As an agent, actually, let me rephrase that. As a general agent affiliated with the firm, we have the authority to sign the written agreements on behalf of our firm. So the client has an agency agreement with the firm. One thing I can do as the agent, affiliated agent, is sign the agency agreement. And what we get specific to in North Carolina is when our agency agreements have to be in writing. So when you're working with the owner of a property, may it be for sale or for lease, we have to have our agency agreements in writing at the inception. I cannot perform a single service for an owner without first getting a written agency agreement. Eventually, all of our buyers and tenants have to be in writing, but we do have the ability to work with a buyer or tenant under an oral agency agreement at first. So we can work with a buyer or tenant orally at first. It's an express agreement, which means all the terms have been stated. We can work with that buyer or tenant under an oral agency agreement until the time we are ready to present an offer for sale or an offer for lease on their behalf. I cannot present an offer on somebody's behalf if I don't have a written agency agreement. Is everybody good with that? Seller lessors from the beginning. I cannot do a single thing for an owner if I don't have a written. Buyer tenant, I can be oral at first. The oral buyer tenant agreement is non-exclusive, which means how many firms can the buyer tenant date? Non-exclusive. Non-exclusive. Yep, they're out there playing the field, aren't they? We cannot demand exclusivity under an oral agreement. Also, under an oral agreement, we cannot bind them to work with us for a certain period of time. If I'm going to say you're going to work with me and only me for 2 months, we got to put that in writing. We cannot bind them or commit them in an oral agreement. Here's our musts again. We saw these in Unit 8. Our written agency agreement must be signed by all parties. Again, the broker can sign on behalf of the firm. The firm does not sign the agency agreement, just the broker. Because the broker is the one that signs it, you need your license number. When you get a license, you'll get a 6-digit license number. Go ahead and memorize it. Put it on a flashcard if you have to. But you need that 6-digit license number everywhere you go. When you sign it, you need your license number. Our written agency agreements have to have a definite end date. When it's over, unless we agree to extend it. The exception to this is if it's a property management agreement. We still have an end date, but in our property management agreement, we can agree to allow for an automatic renewal. And then our last must, which was good timing that we looked at this morning, all of our written agency agreements must have the non-discrimination clause. Telling the consumer, telling the client that we cannot and will not discriminate based on the protected classes. Questions? Okay. Let's take 10. come back, we keep going. back. All right. So I am taking attendance. I did take attendance, so make sure you tell me in the chat. Thank you. Good. Okay. So written agency agreements. So remember we just said that you can work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement at first. The latest we have to work with this buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement is when we're ready to present the offer on their behalf. We have the offer written up, the buyer has signed it, and now we're ready to present it to the seller, the listing agent. That's the point that I have to have the buyer agency agreement in writing. So now the question comes up, what if you are ready to present this offer on behalf of your buyer and you hand them the buyer agency agreement and they say, nope, I'm not going to sign it. I cannot present it on their behalf without getting that agency agreement in writing. I've got to have it. So I can say, okay, well, I present it. You can sign it later if it gets accepted. If they refuse to sign, then we cannot present the offer. Now, we do have a couple options. We may be able to get the buyer to enter into a buyer agency agreement just for that one address. So you have a written agreement for 123 Main Street. Buyer signs that, I can present the offer on their behalf. The last ditch effort, and the real estate commission says, warning, caution, it's very discouraged, but it is an option if we need it. We may be able to downgrade our buyer from a client to a customer and act as a seller subagent. Proceed with caution. Let's talk this through. If you're downgrading the buyer from a client to a customer, your loyalties are shifting. Yes, you did represent the buyer as a client, but now you're downgrading them. Your role changes to a seller subagent. Where are your loyalties now? Your loyalties are to the seller. If we do this, again, the commission says this is not how we practice. This is not the norm. It's discouraged. Proceed with caution. But if we are going to make this downgrade, we need to remind the buyer what we know about them. Because once we downgrade them, we now have a duty to share that formally confidential information now with the seller. So in other words, the buyer needs to go into that with full disclosure. Remember, you told me how low you were willing to go, or how high you were willing to go. Remember, you told me how much you were willing to pay. If I downgrade you, I have a duty to share that with the seller. Think about this. You book a first-class flight on an airplane and you get to the airport and they say, we're going to downgrade you to coach. How do you feel? Not real good, huh? So last ditch effort. Guys, bottom line, here's the deal. Either you're my client or you're my customer. If you don't want to sign this paperwork and be my written client, if you don't want the downgrade to a customer, I have no other legal alternative. I can only work with you as a client or a customer. Seller subagents mean the buyer is unrepresented. The buyer is the customer. They say, no, I don't want to be a client. No, I don't want to be a customer. I have no other legal alternative. Those are my options. Our comments section also gives us a nice review on our agency disclosure or working with real estate agent. This applies to sales transactions. It does not apply to lease transactions. Thus, it does not apply to all real estate transactions. Remember, that little word means a whole lot. It only applies to sales transactions. We have a duty to hand it to them and review it with them. Handing it to them and saying, sign here, is not enough. We have to review it with them and ask them to sign. The commission has provided us with the very convenient Q&A on working with real estate agents. So again, they help us put words in our mouths. We don't have to recreate the wheel. And in sales transactions, we have a duty to disclose our agency status no later than first substantial contact. We always need to be on alert for substantial contact. If we feel that we're getting close to first substantial contact, we need to stop talking. If we've hit first substantial contact, sometimes you hit it before you are prepared for it, then we need to interrupt them. Before you say any more, I need to explain working with real estate agents in North Carolina. First substantial contact is that period in time when the conversation switches gears from the property to the people. And when the people start talking about their PTM, price, term, or motive. Price, term, or motive about this transaction, we need to say, please stop talking. My loyalty is to the other party. And most importantly, I don't owe you confidentiality until and if you decide to hire me. Confidentiality is only for clients. If you never hire me, I never owe you confidentiality. That's a client level service. So we need to review it. We need to discuss it. We always need to be on alert for this first substantial contact. As we talked about in Unit 7, people talk. It just blows my mind. People come up to the grocery store and just start sharing their life story with you. Y'all ever had that happen? People talk. And guess what? People love to talk about real estate. As soon as they find out you have a license, they're going to start talking. We can talk about real estate, the market, what's going on, day-to-day operations. But if that conversation switches gear and they start saying, well, we were thinking about buying a house within 4 months and this is how much we want to pay. Whoa, stop talking. A couple of different scenarios with our disclosure, agency disclosure. One of the ones that we've talked about, probably one of the more common ones that we've talked about, if you've already been hired as a seller's agent, you're acting as a seller's agent or a seller sub-agent, and you're communicating with prospective buyers. We have a duty to disclose our status of working with the seller at first substantial contact. When we meet that buyer, that prospective buyer, we hit first substantial contact, we have a duty to disclose. I think one of the better examples we have of these is if I'm doing an open house on Sunday. If I'm doing an open house for an owner, for a seller, I have some kind of agency agreement. My loyalty is to the seller. Buyer comes in the open house and hits first substantial contact. I need to say, whoa, whoa, stop talking. Now, what if a buyer comes into my open house and say, wow, it's kind of a gloomy day. It looks like we're in for a couple of days of rain. Did we hit first substantial contact? Did we learn anything at all about the buyer's price, term, or motive? No, that's called general conversation, and that's okay. We can talk about the weather and baseball and whatever it is you want to talk about. Once that buyer at the open house says, wow, this is my dream home. This is what I've always wanted to buy. How much is the seller going to accept? Guess what? We hit first substantial contact just like that. Do you have a question? So when you've been hired as a seller's agent, or you're working as a seller sub-agent, when you're communicating to prospective buyers, we have to do our disclosure at first substantial contact. The other scenario is if you've been hired as a buyer's agent. Now you're a buyer's agent and you're communicating with the seller or the seller's agent. This disclosure is required at initial. I need everybody to see the difference between first substantial and initial. Initial contact is, hi, my name is Julie. When I've been hired as a buyer's agent, when I'm communicating with a listing that the buyer's interested in, I've got to disclose my status of working with that buyer at initial contact. Typically, this happens when you're scheduling the appointment on behalf of your buyer. So we have a centralized showing system that we use. You got one place to schedule all your showings. And you got to check a box. What role are you? Are you a buyer's agent? Are you a seller sub-agent? Or possibly a dual agent? You have to check your role. And when the listing agent and the seller get the request, it's going to say, Julie Campbell, comma, buyer's agent, comma, wants to show your home tomorrow at 2 o'clock. When did I disclose that I'm working with a buyer? Right after they learn my name, initial contact. Same thing, if my buyer wants to see the property tomorrow, but they have a question and they say, will you call the listing agent and ask the question? And I say, of course I will. And I call the listing agent and I say, I have a buyer. My name is Julie. I'm disclosing my status at initial contact. We need to know our role to know when to disclose our status. Also covered under the comments, as well as in Unit 7, is dual agency. Guys, not all states allow dual agency. This is why this isn't a state-specific topic. What do we know about dual agency? I always picture a little red bouncing ball. Dual agency is intentionally created with informed written consent. Did y'all see the bouncy ball I just saw in my mind? Intentionally created with informed written consent. Does informed means you're going to look at your buyers and say, we're going to do dual sign here? Is that what informed means? No, we have to discuss it. We have to explain what dual agency. Question comes in, initial contact is from the buyer's agent, not the seller's agent. Once you've been hired as a buyer's agent, you have a duty to disclose your status of being a buyer's agent at initial contact. With dual agency, we have consent, written consent from our sellers and tenants up front, because remember, I cannot do a single thing without having a written agency agreement. Since my buyer and tenant agreement can be oral at first, I can have consent to dual agency orally at first. Again, got to put that in writing before we present the offer. Remember, our simplest form of dual agency, I can't get it any simpler than this. Dual agency is one firm, one transaction, two clients. The seller has hired the firm to sell 123 Main Street. The buyer has hired the same firm to help them purchase 123 Main Street. Remember, it's about the firm. Remember when we were talking about the BIC a little bit ago, and we said if you have a firm with 4 office locations, dual agency is about the firm. So if you have 4 office locations, you could be a dual agent with another agent in another office. It follows the firm. Dual agency can be one agent working with both buyer and seller. Dual agency can also be 2 agents, one working with the buyer, one working with the seller. Guess what? In dual agency, that doesn't matter because it's the firm that's in dual agency. It's not about the individual broker. One firm, one transaction, 2 clients. Dual agency can be 1 or 2. We'll see this again in just a second. Just making our way through the comments. Your comments does address auction sales in North Carolina. Please, before you start writing every single word, please listen to me for a second. Remember about auction sales. We're going to put auctions in their own separate category. We're not even going to know that auctions exist unless you're specifically asked about an auction. If the question gives you the word auction, then you focus on auctions. If it doesn't say auction, then they don't exist. Everybody good with that? Pretend they're not even a thing unless the question specifically asks about auctions. Auctions are their own unique beast. We don't have to do our working with real estate agent disclosure. You're not going to have dual agency in an auction. The auctioneer is only going to represent the seller. Maybe the buyer in the auction sale is represented, maybe they're not. Maybe they come with an agent, maybe they're unrepresented, but what we need to understand is dual agency is not going to happen. If the buyer does come with an agent, the agent does need to disclose their status no later than when they're ready to put the contract in writing. Please remember with an auction, the auctioneer has the right to bind the seller. So when that gavel comes down and the auctioneer says sold, congratulations, we're under contract. Obviously, the next step is going to be to put that thing in writing. And at that time is when the buyer's agent needs to disclose their status. The auctions are a totally separate category. They're not even a thing unless your test question specifically says something about auctions. Please always remember dual agency status is of the firm. Are you going to be in dual agency? I don't know. You need to look towards the firm. This is not about the individual broker. This is about the firm. So there's our in-house transaction. In-house means one firm, one transaction, 2 clients. Both buyer and seller have hired the firm. If the seller hires the firm and the buyer does not, but they're working with an agent of the firm, unrepresented buyer, I'm not in dual agency. I have a seller client and a buyer customer. I need 2 clients. That's why with dual agency, we need to look towards the firm. Have both clients hired the firm. Again, please understand, this is not about the individual agent. Technically, in dual agency, because it's the firm that's straddling the wall. Remember our dual agency wall? The firm is straddling the wall 50-50. Half of us is represents looking out for the buyer, the other half is looking out for the seller. The firm and all the agents owe equal loyalty to both buyer and seller. Technically, the firm can run around and discuss, the agents in the firm can run around and discuss the client's confidential information within the firm because we're all straddling the wall together. However, dual agency does not give us the ability to share my seller's confidential information with my buyer or my buyer's confidential information about the seller. We are in dual, the firm is in dual, but we still have a duty to protect buyer and seller confidential information. Some firms may not recommend, may prohibit you from discussing your client's information with each other. It's one of those, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And one of the big reasons why the firm may not allow these conversations to happen in the office is because now it takes away our ability to be designated. Designated dual agency is a form of dual agency. We can't do designated if we don't have a yes to dual. I think we all agreed back in Unit 7 that designated is what's best for the client. I think we were all in agreement that dual is not in the best interest of the client. It's in the best interest of the transaction. But if we can get everybody to agree to dual, and if the firm offers designated, that's what's best for the client. This is what I need you guys to understand. Designated is not automatic. The firm has to allow designated. The firm has to have a policy in place that says, how are we going to designate? How are we going to handle this when we are designated? Not all firms offer designated. It's not automatic. Please do not go into these exams assuming that designated, they have to tell you if we're going to do designated. It's not automatic. What if, for example, I were a one-man firm? I'm the firm and it's just me. Shake your head, yes or no. Can I offer designated dual agency? It's just me. There's nobody else. Can I offer designated dual agency? No, because designated is always how many brokers? 2. So if I'm a one-man show, designated is not an option. Okay, so what if you join my firm and now we're a 2-man show and you and I do everything together? We go on listing appointments together. We go on buyer consultations. We split up showings. Would it be good practice for us to offer designated? No. There's so many examples out there of why firms may not offer designated. And I do think it's a common misconception of pre-licensing students. And I think that misconception is because designated is what's best for the client. I think in our heart of hearts, we want to do what's best for the client. The firm has to offer it. The firm has to make that option available. It's not automatic. If the firm offers designated, there's a couple caveats. You can't be designated if you have prior confidential information about the other side. You're working with one party, maybe the buyer, I don't care, pick a party. You're working with one buyer. If you know something about the seller, you can't be designated. So back to our conversation about dual. Technically, we can walk around the office sharing our information, but once we blab, we've eliminated our ability to be designated. Call it water cooler gossip. I run away fast from water cooler gossip. The other big caveat of designated, and probably, no, not probably, hands down, the #1 problem topic from Unit 7. The provisional broker and the broker in charge cannot be designated opposite of each other. Remember, as a provisional broker, your broker in charge is in your back pocket. They probably prepped you for the listing appointment. They might have been with you during the buyer consultation. If the broker in charge is doing their job, they know about your client because they were there. They were coaching you. They were helping you through the transaction. And because of the nature of their relationship, they cannot be designated opposite of each other. Yes or no? Can they be in dual together? Can the provisional broker and the BIC be in dual? Think about it. Can the broker in charge and the provisional broker be in dual? Remember, who's in dual? Is it the individual agent? No, it's the firm. They can be in dual. Yes, they can be in dual. They cannot be designated. Did everybody hear me? They can be in dual because it's the firm that's in dual. They cannot be designated. Write that last bullet point down, highlight it, put it on a flashcard.
Okay.
See the word designated. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure I'm clarifying because I was just thinking about that. So designated is a formal dual agency, but if they're in dual only, they can be opposite of each other. That's what you just said?
Nope. Dual agency is one firm and all the agents in the firm are straddling.
Right.
Yep. So in order to be designated, if we allow designated, one agent is kicked off the wall and designated to work exclusively with the buyer, and a different agent is kicked off the wall and designated to work exclusively with the seller. The firm's still full, right? The firm's still straddling the wall.
Mm-hmm.
It's kicked a couple agents off the wall.
Okay.
And that brings exclusivity. Designation brings exclusivity back to the relationship. Okay. Remember our football analogy? In dual agency, we're a referee. In designated, we go back to being the coach. We have to have a yes to dual in order to offer designated, if the firm allows it. If you happen to be the one agent in the dual agency situation, back to dual agency, you happen to be the one agent working with both buyers, sellers, we said, this does not give you permission to run around, blab everybody's confidential information. If you're acting as the single agent, dual agent, you cannot call the buyer and say, I know the seller's secrets. We still have a duty to keep our client's confidential information, protect the client. Somebody asked me at the beginning of class, refresher of what units to focus on for your test. 7 and 8. It's all about agency. Write that down, please. 7 and 8. Agency. We'll talk about others when I'm done. There's agency in unit 7 and 8. There's agency in our comments. We also have the commission rule, A.0104. Also in the Campbell folder. Please read that. You want to know everything about agency agreements and agency disclosure, what the commission says about it? It's in the Campbell folder. Straight from the horse's mouth, as they say, right? Moving on in our comments, we talk about just some general brokerage provisions and things that all brokers have to know about, be aware about. So there's a general brokerage commission on us acting as parties to the transaction. If you are listing a property that you own, you are one of the names on the deed, you have an ownership interest, and you want to sell that property, you can act as the listing agent, you can represent yourself, but a huge conflict of interest would be representing the buyer in that same transaction. Remember what old car says, I owe you all the loyalty. I put your interest above all others, including my own. But guys, let's face it. If I'm one of the names of the deed, whose best interest do I actually have? Mine. Do we see the conflict of interest? The buyer could be my customer with full disclosure. The buyer could be represented by another agent in my firm. They can't be represented by me. All good rules have an exception. So the exception to this rule is if you own commercial property, you have an ownership in commercial property, and your ownership interest is less than 25%. If your ownership interest in the commercial property is less than 25%, you can represent the buyer in this transaction as long as you give that buyer full disclosure. You tell the buyer going into this, I have a 15% interest in this property. Are you comfortable with that? And if the buyer says, yes, I'm comfortable with that, you think you want to follow that conversation up with an email or a text message? You better believe it. What if you're the listing agent? And this will happen to you, by the way. What if you're the listing agent? You don't own the property. You're just helping a seller sell. And you end up falling in love with the property. You think, my goodness, this is the cutest house I've ever seen in my entire life. I want to buy it. If you want to buy a property that you have listed, get with your BIC. Your BIC may discuss with the seller, because you know stuff about the seller now. You've been the listing agent. You know stuff about the seller. Your BIC may discuss this with the seller. They may give the seller the option to work with another agent. If you become interested in a property that you have listed, I've done it. I listed a house once and so cute. Full disclosure. There's a general brokerage provision if we change our name or address. So if you get married and change your name, if you get divorced and change your name, or if you move your address, we have a duty to notify the commission of change in our contact information within 10 days of the change. Once you get your license, you'll have a log on to ncrec.gov. You have your own little log on where you can log on and access your records, access your files. And within that log on, you can update your contact information. So if you change your name, your address, any of your contact information, you've got to report that to the commission, notify the commission within 10 days of the change. General brokerage provisions cover our advertising guidelines. Remember, we've been saying, I cannot advertise your home for sale or for rent until I have that written agency agreement. I can't put a sign in the yard. I can't put any advertisement in Facebook, social media, wherever, until I have the written consent, until I have a signed agency agreement. Your BIC is ultimately responsible for the advertising that goes out on behalf of the office. Your BIC may have a policy that says they need to review all advertising. before it goes, especially you guys as provisional brokers. The BIC is looking for a couple things. Make sure that you're properly advertising the property. Make sure there's no unintentional discriminatory language in your advertising. The BIC's also going to make sure that your firm's branding is correct. All of your firms have a brand. You have the firm's logo. You can use that, but you got to use that logo. My firm's logo is blue and white, but it's not just any shade of blue. It's a very specific shade of blue. When it comes to brand identity, the best example I know to give you guys are our golden arches. Can't we spot those things from miles away, especially when we're hungry? That is the McDonald's brand identity. That's how we recognize the brand. Now, all your firms will have a brand too, so the BIC wants to make sure you're in compliance. Thank you, Ezra. Another thing that falls under advertising, when you're advertising anything, a property for sale, your brokerage services, we can't have a blind ad. And a blind ad is one that doesn't include the name of the firm. If you're advertising a property for sale, you got to have the name of the firm. Remember, whose listing is it? It's the firms. If you're affiliated with a firm and you're advertising your brokerage services, you're advertising under the name of the firm. Social media applies to this. We could spend the next day and a half if we wanted to. We're not going to, but we could spend the next day and a half talking about whether you need a business Facebook page or if you want to use a personal Facebook page. We're not going down that road. Things for you to start to consider. If you do a business Facebook page, set it up under the firm's name. You can advertise your services, Julie Campbell with ABC Realty. If you do a personal route, you need to make sure you include the firm's name whenever you send out something about your brokerage services. If your firm's name is in your email address, so let's say, for example, your email address is julie@kellerwilliams.com. That's not sufficient. It needs to actually say Keller Williams in the ad somewhere. So blind ads, we cannot advertise without our firm's name. I took a class a couple weeks ago and they were talking about various things and advertising came up. And the instructor brought up a pretty good point that, I mean, you got to think about, because right now on social media, especially, we love our memes, don't we? And we see a cute meme and we grab it and we share it. And there was a meme going around not too long ago, and I don't know where in the world it was, but evidently the meme was like, Beyonce is coming to town, buy a house from me so I can afford to go see Beyonce. Are you advertising your brokerage services? Are you letting the world know that you're a real estate agent when you say something like buy a house from me? You advertise your brokerage services. So if you want to share that meme, you better say Julie Campbell with this firm. That's where we got to watch things on social media. That's what we got to think about, especially once you're licensed, what you're sharing, what you're putting out there. Anytime you're telling the world you're a real estate agent, you're advertising your services. Does that make sense? I never thought about it that way, but advertising those services. Reach out to me. Reach out to me. Yep, after class. Thank you. Another general brokerage provision we have, again, one that we talked about. I love this section because it's a nice review, isn't it? There's a general brokerage provision on delivery of instruments. We have a duty to deliver instruments within 3 days. So first off, let's talk about what the heck an instrument is. An instrument is just any document related to this transaction. So typically it's going to start with our agency disclosure, our agency agreement. Eventually we're going to put this thing under contract, have all of our contract paperwork. And then fingers crossed, we take this thing to closing. The general rule of thumb says, if the consumer signs it, they deserve a copy of it. You as the consumer, if you enter into a binding agency agreement, don't you want a copy of that? Yeah, you as the consumer, if you enter into a offer to purchasing contract, don't you want a copy of that? Of course. So what the commission rule says is that we have 3 days to deliver these instruments within 3 days of execution. There's a common misconception out there. There are some agents that think, I'll just wait until the end of the transaction, send my clients everything, and one nice, neat package. Does commission rule allow us to do that? No. They sign it, we have 3 days to get them a copy. They sign it, we have 3 days to get them a copy. They sign it throughout the transaction, anything they sign. And guys, really, how long does it take you to send an email with a PDF attachment? Right? Here's our signed agency agreement. I look forward to working with you. Attach the PDF. You've done your job, haven't you? Please note, this says deliver. If you send that PDF attachment, do you think you will want to save that sent email in your transaction file? I think so. Because what do we document? Everything. So if you put that sent email in your transaction file, you have a date, a timestamp of when you sent it. What they do with it when they get it, are they going to file it? Are they going to print it out? Are they going to delete it? It makes no difference to me. My job is to deliver it. Another good rule that has an exception. The exception to this rule is when you're delivering offers to sellers. When you're delivering an offer to a seller, we have a duty to deliver that immediately, but in no event later than 3 days. So this could be the listing agent that receives an offer from a buyer or a buyer's agent. The listing agent has to deliver that offer to their seller immediately. This could also be a buyer's agent delivering the offer to the for sale by owner. Remember, the for sale by owner is unrepresented. You don't have a listing agent to communicate with. So if your buyer's going after a FSBO, we deliver that to the seller immediately, but in no event later than 3 days. We also have a general brokerage provision that covers how many years we keep all of our records. Does anybody remember how many years we keep everything? You can show me. How many years? I wish it were that many. Unfortunately, they only require us to keep it for 3. We have to keep all of our records, retention of records, for at least 3 years. Can you keep it for 7 or 10 or for the rest of your life? Yes. Commission rule says we have to keep it for at least 3 years. And that 3-year clock starts at the successful or the unsuccessful conclusion of the transaction. Successful meaning it closed. Unsuccessful meaning it didn't. Whenever you are done with that client, with that principal, That's when our 3-year clock starts. Everything for 3 years. At least 3 years. General brokerage provisions cover our brokerage fees and compensations. If you stand to make more than agreed upon in your agency agreement, we agree in our agency agreement, you're going to pay me X amount, X percent, or pay my firm X amount. But if you're going to make more, maybe the builder's offering buyer's agents a $5,000 bonus for anybody that closes before April 15th. That $5,000 bonus is above and beyond your agreed upon commission with your client. And in that example, if we're going to make more than what's agreed on, we have to inform our client in a full and timely manner. Full manner says we've got to say $5,000 builder bonus. Timely means within enough time for them to make a decision. In other words, we need to disclose that bonus before they make an offer. They've got to have all information at the time they're ready to make an offer. Do not wait until you're sitting at the settlement table and say, as soon as you sign that, I get a $5,000 bonus. That's not timely. Timely is before the offer where they have all that information. I get asked a lot, why? Why do we have to disclose $5,000 bonus? So let's talk that through. Y'all put your pencils down just for 1 second. Let's talk this through. We're pretty on board, right? That the seller pays the commission. If they offer to pay any bonuses or anything, that's going to be paid by the seller, for example. Commission, bonuses, all that comes from the sales price, right? Yep. Who pays the sales price? Who pays that sales price? The buyer. Is it stand to reason that your $5,000 bonus is rolled into that sales price? So technically, who's paying your bonus? The buyer. Why do they need to know? Because it's a very good chance that that sales price is $5,000 higher because they're offering you a bonus. Full and timely disclosure. Couple restrictions on our compensation. We don't have to disclose our commission to customers, just to clients. We disclose our compensation to clients in our agency agreements. That's why we have them. And what we agree on in our agency agreements is what the firm expects to collect. But guys, it is nobody's business what I'm going to get. So what is my split of the firm's commission? That is none of your business. We do not have to disclose that to anybody, customer or client. All we disclose is how much the firm expects to get. And as we've been saying, the real estate commission is not going to get involved with commission. They're not going to tell your firm. We talked about price fixing. They're not going to tell your firm how much to charge, how much to split with you. It all comes down to firm's policy. Real quick, brokerage fees and compensations. I think this is the third time we've said this now. We cannot compensate an unlicensed person. We can only pay them hourly or salary. They cannot be paid on a transaction basis. And then remember we talked about RESPA. RESPA is involved if a lender is around. RESPA says that we cannot give or receive referral fees or kickbacks for recommending a settlement service provider. If you suggest a lender to your buyer, the only thing that lender can do is call you or email you and say, thank you for sending the buyer your way. You cannot give or receive referral fees, kickbacks, bonuses for recommending settlement service providers. Keep in mind too, RESPA is only around if a lender's around. So if it's a cash buyer, can you accept a referral fee for recommending the home inspector? If it's a cash buyer, sure. RESPA is only around if a lender's around. If it's a cash buyer, there's no lender. If there's a cash buyer, the rule is there are no rules. I'm telling y'all, cash buyers are so much easier than buyers getting financing. Not as many of them out there, but we don't have as many rules. Questions on our fees and compensation? Somebody says, you know, a firm that makes caps on commissions. Yeah, they may say when you sell up to a certain amount, we'll cap you. And after that, all the commission's yours for the rest of the year. I don't know if it's common, but it is one way that several firms do structure their compensation. So sure. Again, you guys, I always encourage you. I sound like a good agent right now, don't I? Talk to 2 or 3 different firms, shop around, so you have something to compare and contrast before you sign on with somebody. Okay. All right. Let's take 10. You come back, we'll finish the day out. Welcome back. We're going to go over a little bit more on license law and commission rule. We're going to talk about when we end. There's just a few things I want to remind you guys about for next week. We'll talk about what Tuesday is going to look like. So we'll stop just a few minutes early today so we can make sure we're all on the same page for next week. So let me go ahead. Cameras are back on and I can see you. Part of your face. I'm taking attendance. And any questions about anything we've covered so far? A lot of general brokerage provisions. Again, this is all in the comments. If you haven't read the comments yet, please do so. This will get you through your state exam, state section of your exam. Big chunk of it. So earlier today, we talked about the broker in charge. And we talked about them being the boss and being designated. And I asked if any of you have plans to start your own firm one day. A couple of you said yes, maybe, not sure. I don't know, Julie, it's too early to ask me. When and if you decide to start your own firm, there's a couple things you need to take into consideration. If you're gonna, and I have taken attendance, so you guys make sure you tell me you're back. If you are going to create an actual firm, you've gone through the process of creating a firm and you got that firm licensed with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Interestingly enough, all that will be covered in post-licensing. So starting your own firm, getting it licensed, all that you'll get to in post-licensing. But if you do go that route with the firm, you have got to have a designated broker in charge at each location. Maybe that's you as the designated BIC, or maybe you bring somebody else on board to be the designated broker in charge. But if you're going to be a firm, again, you create the firm, Secretary of State, all that's coming in post-licensing. You get the firm license with the Real Estate Commission. You have to have a designated broker in charge. We said you have to have one under each roof, which means you cannot have a BIC supervising multiple office locations. Keep that simple. One BIC per roof. One BIC per office location. If you're going out on your own, you may choose not to create a firm. You may choose to go out as what's known as a sole proprietor. A sole proprietor doesn't have to have a firm. You don't have to have a broker in charge. However, as a sole proprietor, if you're going to maintain a trust account, we'll get into the trust account soon. If you're going to maintain a trust account, if you're going to advertise your brokerage services in any way, talk about that, or if you're going to affiliate anybody else with you, you've got to create the firm and have a designated broker in charge. So you have two choices. You either have a firm for real estate brokerage activities, or you're a sole proprietor without a trust account, advertising your services, or more than one BIC. So let's break all this down. The word sole tells us how many people work there, how many employees you got. Yeah, sole means one. So that third one makes sense, right? You can't be sole if you bring on somebody with you. If you bring on somebody else, you got to create the firm, get a designated BIC, or designate yourself. The advertising your broker services is the tricky one. As a sole proprietor, you cannot advertise your broker services. So basically, as a sole proprietor, you are operating to collect referral fees. You can refer people to other agents and collect a fee. I'll be really honest with you guys. This is my retirement plan down at the beach. I'm going to be a sole proprietor. I'm not going to advertise my broker services. I'm just going to sit back and collect my referral checks. Advertising your brokerage services in any way, and that includes the simple act of handing out a business card. When it comes to being a sole proprietor, the referral fees you can get, the business you can get, comes from those that should reasonably know that you have a real estate license. Who reasonably knows that you have a real estate license? Mom, dad, significant other, BFF, right? You're not on Facebook promoting your services. You're not telling the public, call me, I can help. Again, you guys are a couple of years away from this. But just know you're going to get more in post. But if you choose to go out on your own, you have some options. And if you take the sole proprietor route, you have some limitations. If you go the firm route and you need a BIC, maybe you become BIC eligible. We already saw this earlier today. You become BIC eligible. Once you're BIC eligible, you're positioned to become the designated broker in charge. So when you do create a firm, you need a designated BIC. Maybe it's you, maybe you bring on somebody else. By the way, there is, just as a side note, again, I don't think you'll be tested on it, but just as a side note, there is the ability to become the designated BIC and then go take the 12-hour BIC course so you can like bypass the BIC eligible status. You'll learn more about that post-licensing as well. But most cases, you become BIC eligible. Once you're BIC eligible, you're positioned to become the designated broker in charge. I gotcha. Thank you. Once you become the designated or BIC eligible, excuse me, once you become BIC eligible, you have to maintain that BIC eligible status. You do so by renewing your license every year. We'll talk about license renewal. We don't get to it today. We'll see it Tuesday. And to maintain your BIC eligible status, you got to maintain that license on an active status. If your license fails to become active, then you lose your BIC eligibility. So once you become BIC eligible, you got to maintain that status. Talking about renewing, active, inactive, all that good stuff. We're getting there. Sole proprietor does not require a broker in charge because a sole proprietor is not a firm. Only the firm requires the broker in charge. Once you're BIC eligible, if for some reason you lose your BIC eligibility, it's a word now, then you got to take that 12-hour BIC course again to get your BIC eligibility back. So if you fail to renew, if you fail to maintain an active license, you got to go through that BIC process again, submit another application, take that class, da 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 da. Again, you guys are way away from this, at least 2 years from the time you get your license, assuming you're going to jump in and start full time. Let's focus on one thing at a time. And when you're ready to open your firm, refer back to license law and commission rule, because I can't guarantee you things won't change between now and then. Still under general brokerage provisions, we are not attorneys. Guys, there's a reason this comes up over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Are we good on this? Are you guys sick and tired of hearing about this? We cannot draft legally binding documents. We cannot draft legal instruments. All we're allowed to do is fill in the blanks of the pre-printed forms. Even if my client asks, can't you just put this in the contract? Can't you just delete it? No, I can't. I need you guys to start your morning affirmations. When you look at yourself in the mirror, start reminding yourself, I am not an attorney. Unless you are. And when I asked, nobody fessed up. So we are not attorneys. We cannot practice law. General brokerage provision on our offers and sales contracts. The most used contracts we have are the ones provided to us by the North Carolina Association of Realtors. Those are the ones that we looked over in class. Please always remember, we're welcome to use any attorney drafted contract. If we're using a non-NCAR form, another attorney drafted contract, it has to comply with Commission Rule A.0112. Again, just here for your reference, not one we asked you to look over. Commission Rule A.0112 gives a list of like 19 things. And it says if a licensed agent, a licensed broker is using a non-NCAR form, it must include these 19 things. So please always remember, the North Carolina Association of Realtors NCAR forms are the most common, but they're not the only ones that we're allowed to use. Another general brokerage provision we touched on earlier is reporting your criminal convictions. We all know you have to do background check to get your license. Once you get your license, if you get yourself in trouble with the court, you've got to report that to the commission. If you've been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor, and I need you guys to make a note of that word convicted. Being charged of a crime is not the same thing as being convicted. Convicted means the gavel has come down and the judge said guilty. So once you've been convicted, we have to report that to the commission within 60 days of the conviction. We asked earlier if you guys have another professional license. I'm not talking about your driver's license. I'm talking about another professional license, CPA, CNA, cosmetology. If you get yourself in trouble with your other licensing board, you've got to report it to the commission within 60 days of that disciplinary action. When it comes to this rule, I always think of mama. I don't know what kind of household you grew up in, but in my house, if I messed up, if I did something wrong, it was best that I fess up to mama and not let mama find out on her own. Anybody else grow up in a similar house? Yeah. Think of the commission as mama. You've got to confess. You've got to tell them. What are they going to do to you? I don't know. They're going to review it case by case. Are you going to get in trouble? I don't know. Failure to report it will get you in trouble. Failure to report it to the commission is a commission rule violation. So if you get yourself in trouble, fess up. Don't let them find out and then get you for not reporting it. I guarantee you, if you don't report it, you will get yourself in trouble when they figure it out. So 60 days once you've been convicted or you get yourself in trouble with another licensing board. Guys, this came up a lot last year in the disciplinary action. Again, I have no idea how they found out, but they did. I saw this a lot last year. What questions do I have on this? "60 days of the conviction." General brokerage provision covers our seller disclosures. In Unit 8, we talked about the Residential Property and Owner Association Disclosure Statement, also known as the RPODs. We also talked about the MOG, the Mineral and Oil and Gas Right Disclosure. These are seller disclosures, which means the seller is responsible for completing them. We can assist, but I can't do it for them. You guys remember caveat emptor? What's caveat emptor say? Buyer beware. Because we are a caveat emptor state, the seller doesn't have to disclose anything. The seller has the right to say, yes, there's a problem with the home. No, there's no problem with the home, or no representation. These are mandatory forms with optional disclosure, which means the seller has the right under caveat emptor to say no representation, regardless of how the seller completes the RPODs. We always have a duty to disclose material facts. We always have a duty to disclose material facts. I don't care if you're talking to a client or a customer. We always have a duty to disclose material facts. If I could word that another way, we never have a reason not to disclose material facts. Disclose, 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 regardless of how the seller completes. Failure for the seller to complete the form and provide it to the buyer could be an out for the buyer. The buyer has 3 days. If they haven't received the disclosure, they can terminate the contract, get their earnest money and their due diligence back. So failure for the seller to complete it is an out for the buyer. Also under general brokerage provisions is how we handle our closing disclosures. Back from Unit 21. Commission rule says we have a duty to make sure that the client gets the closing disclosure. Remember our delivery of instruments? It's my responsibility to make sure that they get the closing disclosure. Now, the truth is a lot of times the attorney hands it to the client at settlement. But isn't that another good reason for me to attend settlement, is to make sure that that delivery of the closing disclosure happened, to ensure that I saw the attorney say, here you go. That's what we mean by ensure delivery. Make sure that it happens. And then our big part of our duty under general brokerage is to make sure that these closing disclosures are accurate When we find a mistake, we've got to report that mistake to the lender and the attorney. Things that we can review the closing disclosure for accuracy. We can pull out the contract and any amendments to the contract, and we can make sure the sales price is correct. The earnest money, due diligence, seller paid closing costs, is there a home warranty? If there are any unpaid invoices that we're aware of, maybe for example, the home inspector allowed the buyer to pay for the home inspection at settlement. The home inspector is sending you the invoice for you to send it to the attorney. We now have a duty to make sure that one, it's on the closing disclosure, and two, that it's accurate. Other things that we can review for accuracy, we now know how to prorate taxes. We can calculate interim interest. We can calculate excise tax. Again, when we find a mistake, we've got to report that. Questions on any of our general brokerage provisions? Continuing on with our comments, this might be a long awaited topic for some of you. Another one of those topics we danced all around. Now we're finally here. This is a good sign we're getting to the end, isn't it? So here's our discussion on the trust account, also known as the escrow account. Again, from the comments. The basic definition of a trust account, it's an account that has somebody else's money in it. It's an account that is set up for the purpose of safeguarding somebody else's money. Your money does not belong in the trust account. Your money goes in an operating account. If you're a firm, when you get that commission check, you deposit in the operating account, you pay your agents, your power bill, your coffee provider bill, all that out of the operating account. So the only money we have in the trust account is somebody else's. We're just simply acting as the safeguard, keeping it safe, keeping it fair between the parties. Why don't you guys tell me in a private chat, for sale or for lease, what are some examples of other people's monies that we want to safeguard in a trust account? What are some examples for sale and for lease? What are some examples of other people's money that we may want to safeguard in a trust account? So I'm seeing things float through here. So some examples, the for lease situation are security deposits. If you're a property manager and we've collected security deposits, we need a trust account and escrow account to hold that security deposit. Property managers will also run rent through the escrow account, deposit in the escrow account, and then disperse to the other people that need to get paid from that rent. The sales side, the money we're going to see in a trust account is our earnest money deposit. I saw a couple of you said due diligence. Let's talk about that. Due diligence goes directly from the buyer to the seller. We're not going to safeguard it. It doesn't need to hold anywhere. The buyer writes a check or gets a cashier's check directly to the seller. So due diligence is not going to be in a trust account. So on the sale side, we're going to have earnest money. If you're any kind of deposit, anything like that. Questions on that? Everybody good while we don't have due diligence? The buyer pays the seller directly. All we have in here is the earnest money while we're under contract. Let's say these market a couple years ago has just been crazy. And I heard stories of buyers paying like $50,000 in earnest money. Where do they get that money? $50,000 in earnest money. If you were that buyer dropping $50,000, would you feel comfortable with it hanging out in a seller's bank account or in your real estate agent's bank account? Absolutely not. So the whole point of that security deposit, that trust account, is to safeguard it. It's designed specifically for that safeguarding, that making sure that it's in an impartial account. There are a couple features about the trust account. The trust account is separate from your operating account. If your firm has a trust account, they also have an operating account. Not all real estate firms have a trust account. If your firm does not have a trust account, then our closing attorneys do. Property managers are going to need a trust account for security deposit. That's separate from their operating account. So your operating account is the one you pay your bills out of. The trust account is the one that has somebody else's money. The trust account is custodial, which means those that have money in it don't have access to it. They don't have the ability to withdraw the funds. They can't deposit. They don't have access to it. Each broker in charge is responsible for the trust account of their office. Their employees, whether licensed or unlicensed, may have access to it. But ultimately, the broker in charge is responsible, and they need to limit who has access. Back in my admin days, I maintained the trust account. That sucker was in a locked cabinet in my locked office. And I could tell you the people, all three of us, bless you, all three of us that had a key to get into my office and then into the trust account. It was custodial, it was safeguarded. Who had access was limited. The other feature is that money in the trust account is available on demand. Let's say your firm has a really, really bad day, and every single one of your contracts terminate today. That's a bad day, isn't it? That money, when we disperse that money back to the seller or the buyer, depending, that money needs to be available. We can't say, oh, wait till I get paid on Friday. That money is available on demand. If everybody terminates today, or all your tenants' leases run out today, that money is on demand to disperse the earnest money deposit or the security deposit. Real Estate Commission says that, again, a demand deposit account, the funds must be available on demand. The commission requires the trust account to be in an FDIC bank. Not all banks are FDIC. So if you're opening a firm, or if you're starting a trust account, like credit unions, for example, are not FDIC. You usually see that sticker when you walk in the front door of the bank, if they're FDIC or not. The bank has to lawfully be doing business in North Carolina. They don't need to be located in North Carolina, but they need to be lawfully doing business in North Carolina. And the firm needs to agree to make their account records available for the inspection by the real estate commission. If the real estate commission walks in the front door and says, show us your books, we need to be able to say, here you go. You can't say, oh, hang on just a minute. It's available for inspection at any time. Guys, by the way, the real estate commission does offer a trust account course on how to set it up, what they expect, the requirements, how to balance it each month. So if you're opening a firm with a trust account, remember we talked the other day, if you're already a landlord, your security deposits need to go in a trust account once you get licensed. You're going to want to take that trust account course from the commission to make sure you're doing the trust account the way they expect it. You go to ncrec.gov and click on education, and I'll tell you about the trust account course that they require you if you're going to have open a trust account. With a trust account, the actual words trust account or escrow account has to appear on everything. All literature about the trust account has to very clearly say it's a trust account or an escrow account. The reason being for this, or one of the reasons for this, if I had a firm and I were a one-man firm, I'm the broker in charge, I'm the firm, I'm everything. If I pass away, this trust account can't get caught up in my estate. So by clearly indicating that this is a trust account or an escrow account, my estate knows that this is somebody else's money, not mine. We have to keep accurate records. We need to identify the owner, the funds, the address. I'm getting ready to date myself. Back in my admin days when I did the trust account, probably would have been 03, 04. It was a long time ago. Before all this fancy computer stuff that we had now. I actually had, y'all ready for this? I had one of those accordion files. You guys remember these things that kind of breathed in and breathed out? And I had green ledger cards. And every time I put money in the trust account, I take my green ledger card, I tell you the address, the buyer, the seller, the amount. When we took the money out of the trust account, I zeroed the balance, took my green ledger card and put it in the paper transaction file. This is before our programs today. I have no idea how they're doing it today, but I have a feeling it's much more convenient than what it was dealing with paper and accordion files and green ledger cards and technology. Doesn't matter how you keep those accurate records, just that the records be accurate. You may come across a firm that does for sale and for lease. Some firms do both. The question then is, how many trust accounts do they need? Well, commission rule says you only need one. You can have earnest money and security deposit in the same trust account. So only one is required. The exception to this rule, if you're a property management company and you're managing HOAs, each HOA gets their own trust account. So the only time you may need more than one is if you're managing more than one HOA. Hands down, the number one violation of the trust account, without a doubt, is commingling. Commingling is putting your money in the trust account or taking somebody else's money from the trust account. We got to keep this separate. The trust account holds somebody else's money. The operating account holds your money. So it's, what is today? Thursday? So let's say today's Thursday, you get paid tomorrow. You have no more money, you're flat broke, but you're going to get paid tomorrow. And you get a notice from the power company that says, if we don't have payment by 5 p.m. today, we're going to cut your power. And you think, well, dadgummit, I don't want to lose power. So I think I'll just borrow money from the trust account, pay my power. And then tomorrow when I get paid, I'll put that money back in the trust account. Can you do that? But I don't want to be without power tonight. Can I do that? No, you cannot touch somebody else's money. Even if you want to keep your lights on, you got to work tonight by candlelight, don't you? At least it's not too cold out. No commingling. With one exception. If your bank where your trust account is charges you a monthly fee, you can have up to and no more than $100 of your own money in the trust account so they can take that fee. Monthly fee, quarterly fee, annual fee, whatever they charge. When that amount deplenishes, you can build it back up. Again, never more than $100. And the only reason that $100 would be there is if your bank charges a fee. And that's just to cover the fee. Everybody good with that? Remember, all this money's on demand. So if the bank charges a fee and you don't have the money in there to cover it, then it's coming from somebody else's earnest money or security deposit. Trust accounts can be interest-bearing accounts, which means the bearer of the trust account can make interest. It's got to be in the agreement between the parties. As a matter of fact, the escrow agent having an interest-bearing trust account is in our standard offer to purchase and contract. Each month when you make that interest, you got to transfer it from your trust account to your operating account. That is the escrow agent's money. They can spend it as they wish. If your firm has a trust account, your office has a trust account, again, the BIC is the one that's responsible for it. Even if they allow an unlicensed employee to manage it, they are still ultimately responsible for it. So in the real estate commission, back in the day when I maintained the trust account, I wasn't licensed yet. And if the real estate commission walked in the door and said, show us your books, they were not talking to me. They were talking to the broker in charge. I had to report to him monthly. It says records have to be current and accurate. And while it doesn't specify what current means, I think a good rule of thumb, you get a bank statement every month. That's a really good time to sit down and make sure everything balanced. So when I maintained the trust account, when that bank statement came in, I had to balance it and then take it to my BIC for him to sign off on it. He knew what was going on in that trust account. There's some commission rules about dispersing money from the trust account. If your real estate firm has a trust account, then you have the earnest money. And at some point before settlement, we got to get that earnest money to the closing attorney's office so they have it to process as part of their closing packet. And if your firm is holding the earnest money, your firm will have policies. They'll go over all that with you in new agent training. But if your firm has a trust account, the firm can't disperse the earnest money no more than 10 days prior to settlement. So if your firm has a trust account, you'll go request the check to be cut, and then you will deliver that to settlement. So the attorney has that money to process. If it's already, if you don't have a trust account, then we're going to put it in the attorney's trust account and it's already there. We don't have to get it there. But if your firm has it, we got to get it to the attorneys no more than 10 days prior to settlement. Yay. Thank you for telling me that. There's also another commission rule regarding earnest money. This doesn't apply to security deposits. So just talking about earnest money, there's a disputed trust fund. So let me talk about what this means. We know what the contract says. The contract says if the buyer terminates within due diligence, they'll get their earnest money back. If the buyer terminates after due diligence, then the seller gets the earnest money. So the contract tells us what happens. If you're going to terminate, if you have to terminate, this is what happens to the earnest money deposit. Despite the contract saying that, if we terminate, both parties have to agree to release the earnest money. And if both parties don't agree to release the earnest money, then the earnest money is considered disputed. The escrow agent cannot release the earnest money without both parties' permission. Even though the contract very clearly says what's supposed to happen to it, guys, remember, I'm just safeguarding somebody else's money. I'm not making decisions. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just keeping it safe. I'm keeping it in a secure place. And if either party is disputing it, then the money stays in the escrow account. And if we never do get relief after a certain amount of time, the escrow agent can release the earnest money to the clerk of courts and let the two go downtown and hash it out. So disputed funds is not the right of the escrow agent to decide what to happen. And after a certain amount of time, we make several efforts, please sign, please agree. And after several attempts and certain amount of time, and I honestly don't remember the certain amount of time, but if we never can come to an agreement, the escrow agent releases the funds to the clerk of courts and let the two go down to the courthouse and hash it out. Do you have any questions so far? I do have a few more things to say about the trust account, but I do want to stop here just to talk about next week and what next week looks like. So when we come together on Tuesday, we got a few more things to say about the trust account. We got the rest of license law and commission rule to wrap up. We're close, guys. We're close. So give me another, I don't know, hour or two on Tuesday, and we'll get through that. Also on Tuesday, we have one more very important topic to discuss, but you're not going to have any test questions on it. But even though you're not tested on it, doesn't negate its importance. So once we're done with license law and commission rule, we need to talk about agent safety. I want to make sure that you guys are safe, are out there when you're making yourself open and available to the public. So we'll finish license law and commission rule. We'll talk about safety. We'll go over the exam rules and expectations for Thursday. If for some reason you don't plan to be here on Tuesday, it is your responsibility to get the exam rules and expectations. Failure to comply with exam rules and expectations may mean you lose your exam. If you've taken this test with another instructor or another school, They may have different rules than I do. So what we need to go over on Tuesday are my rules and expectations. Everybody good with that? I want us all to be very clear so we're on the same page Thursday morning. We'll Kahoot on Tuesday, Licensed Law and Commission Rule Kahoot, our last Kahoot. Is that hard to believe? So yeah, finish Licensed Law and Commission Rule, Kahoot, safety, exam rules and expectations, and we're done. The other thing I wanted to point out, don't forget, I know we're spending some time this week and studying. So don't forget a couple things. First off, under the Campbell folder, you got the end of class exam review. So if you want to know what to focus on this weekend, I see some heads bobbing. Does that mean we've already looked at this? Good. Exam rule, class exam rule, end of class exam review. And by the way, this also covers the retake. The retake is not the same test. So if you have to take the retake, that information is also in the end of class exam review. Under the Campbell folder. And then don't forget, under the 100% review, we got a practice final exam. This one's a flat PDF. You can go through on a piece of paper and answer A, B, C, or D. Here's your answer choices. You also have a comprehensive exam and class marker. I did learn you can take this more than once, but please understand, these aren't the test questions you're going to see. So, you know, if you're taking it again and again and again, you're just getting comfortable with these questions. So it's another good comprehensive, and this is on class markers. So that gives you more practice in the format you're going to see your exam next week. And then you also have a comprehensive exam in your book. I think we said it's page 819. Does that sound familiar? 819. Yes, comprehensive exam. This starts on page 819. So you guys got 3 comprehensive exams and an end of course exam review. Practice exam are the same in the book. Nope, these are different. These are 3 different exams. 2 in the online learning system and 1 in your book. Seriously, guys, at this point, I think the practice quizzes are your best bet, because you may know the information, but now we got to get it from here to the test. So I think practicing, and the more we can expose ourselves, some of those test questions are just tricky, aren't they? So learning how to read those, pay attention to the absolute words, dissecting the answer choices. That's what we're doing with the practice with these 3 comprehensive exams. So that's what we're doing next week. Wrapping it up on Tuesday, test on Thursday. Is this hard to believe? It's hard to believe. Ready or not, here we are. What questions do I have? Comments? Concerns? How are we feeling? I see some smiles. I see a couple of you hiding your face from me. It's okay. It's okay. We got all weekend. Guys, remember, I'm around all weekend too. I'm a resource as well. I'm a tool as well. So don't not utilize me. If I can help in any way, please let me know. Fair enough? Y'all have a wonderful weekend. Study hard, but don't spend all weekend with your nose in the book. Go do something else for fun as well. There's such a thing as overstudying. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you guys Tuesday. Wrapping it up. Thank you.